Hi everyone, my name is Orlando Mergado. I'm the sculpture shop supervisor and I am here to show you guys some basic operational and safety information on all of the tools that you're going to be getting at home. So some of this stuff, not everyone is going to get the full pack. Certain classes are going to get some things and certain other classes are going to get other things, but this is going to cover all of those things. And it's just general information about how to safely use these tools at home. So normally you would be here at 185 working in the sculpture shop for your sculpture classes, and obviously we're not going to be doing that this semester, so you're going to have to improvise to some extent based on just the particulars of where you're working. I'm in a classroom and my conditions are probably more ideal than anything you have. The first thing we should probably talk about would be work area. You're not going to necessarily need a huge amount of space. I have a lot of stuff laid out so you guys can see it, but you're probably not going to need as much space as this. But something you're probably going to need is going to be a stable work surface. This is a big heavy workbench, and another nice thing about this workbench is that it's nice and flat all the way to the edge of the table. And the reason why this is beneficial is because when you are working with wood, a lot of times you're going to be clamping material so that you can let go of it and hold your tools. And having a nice flat continuous surface to the edge of your table definitely makes the clamps work better. So it's not the end of the world if you don't have that. Like if you're working on a kitchen table or something that, you know, has a beveled edge or a curved edge of some kind, you can still work with it, but it's a little bit trickier. So that's kind of the biggest thing. You're going to need a couple of feet of space to work in at least. But a lot of what you're going to be able to do is going to be on top of the bench, so you should be fine for the most part. Okay, so with that, I think we're just going to go ahead and start jumping into some tools here. So let's talk about some of the hand tools first, and we'll move our way up to power tools. So the first things that you can see that we have over here are, we have some drilling and we have some cutting tools. We also have some hardware kits here, and some pliers. These are all things that you will, be getting. So there's some random assorted screws and nails and things like that, and cutters. So the cutters, they're mostly for paper, but you can also use them for wood. If you're cutting a thin piece of wood, you can score it and cut it with one of these. I will demo this with a piece of paper just so you guys can see how it works. So this is a cutting mat, and the set is a cutting mat, a small ruler, straight edge, and an X-Acto style 11-inch blade with extra blades. I'll show you how to change those as well. We're also throwing in utility blades. So the way this is going to work, first I'll show you this guy. So this is an X-Acto blade. It's got a cover on it. Whenever you're taking this off, be careful. X-Acto blades are stupid sharp. They will definitely cut you. If you do that, they will stick in a table quite easily. So be very, very careful with X-Acto blades while you're using them. Now, they are going to get dull relatively quickly, especially if you are using these to score or cut wood. So if you're using them on wood, these sets come with maybe 20 blades extra. You're probably going to burn through these in a couple of hours worth of work. Now, to change out a blade, what you want to do is hold tight back here and open this by unscrewing counterclockwise. This collet at the top is going to open, and then you pull the blade out. So if you keep going, this is what will happen eventually. This is what this looks like inside. There's a collet, that's called a collet, and then there's this piece here which helps secure the collet by tightening it. And the bottom of the collet is threaded, the other end of this is threaded, and they thread together, and the collar puts pressure on it, and that's how it holds the blade. So you just start it, take your new blade, hold it with the blade facing away from you, and pop this in here, again, carefully, and then tighten it all the way, as tight as you can go. And that is how you change a blade. So next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna do some cutting. I'm gonna just demo with a piece of paper. So there's a piece of paper, and I want to cut a piece off of it. So for me, ideally, whenever I'm using an X-Acto blade, I like to cut in a direction towards myself. Now, things that you have to be careful about are if you're sitting in a chair behind your workbench and your leg is behind you up here, and you go to cut, if you come all the way to the edge of this and this slides off and your leg is up, you can cut yourself pretty badly. So watch out. The other thing is that you're going to be holding this straight edge here. So if you're holding the straight edge down, you want to make sure your fingers aren't too close to the front. You want to make sure you're holding this pretty far back. And you do have to press down and pull towards yourself. And you have to do it pretty firmly. So it is possible for this to slip. Also, if the X-Acto blade is a little bit loose, there's a good possibility it's going to come out while you're cutting. So I'm going to go ahead and make a cut. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to rest the blade against the straight edge first, press down, and then cut straight towards myself. So you can do that again. Hold firmly, press against straight edge, cut towards yourself, bam. So that's basically what you do. Now, if you were doing this with a thinner wood veneer, you would essentially do the same thing, but usually you're not going to get all the way through the veneer in a single cut. So what you would do is first you would score it, and then you would take that over to the edge of your workbench and then crack it off of there. So there's how you use these guys. So we're going to go ahead and put the cap back on that. So a variant of that is the utility blade. The utility blade comes with one blade that is made of multiple small pieces that can be removed. This is one of the reasons why there are pliers in your toolkits, because what will happen is that you can, once this edge goes dull, and it'll get dull pretty quickly, you can grab. And what you want is you want the jaw to be pretty close to the score itself. So if I want to break this off here, I'm not going to hold this all the way out here. I want to hold pretty close and then break it off. Okay, so you grab tight and you just twist. And then when you want to throw that out, you want to take that, wrap it up in some masking tape and throw it in the garbage. So that's how you cut, that's how you change a blade on it. And the cutting works essentially the same way as it does with the X-Acto blade. The main difference is that the X-Acto blade is more agile. It has a finer blade, so you can do more intricate cutting, whereas the utility blade is more for just sort of like straight cutting. Arguably for most things, if you are cutting into wood, let's say, I would recommend using the utility blade over the X-Acto knife. I would save the utility blade. I would save the X-Acto knife for wood and for paper and things that are easier to get more intricate cuts in and things like that, and more continuous cuts. Okay, so there's a basic on some cutting tools. So from there, we're going to start looking at ways that you can cut and or drill into or fasten wood. So before we get to putting things together, we'll start with taking things apart. We're going to look at how to cut a piece of wood. So for cutting, what we have here is this guy. This is one of our options. This is called a Japanese saw or Japanese style saw. This is actually a Japanese saw. These are pretty nice, actually. Now, right now, this thing comes in a case. I'm going to take the case off and I'm going to demo that because these things are sharp. So unroll the zipper thing, pop that out, and it's going to be wrapped in, I thought it was rice paper, but it is plastic. There's some literature, and then there is this plastic. Now when you go to take this off, you got to be careful not to cut yourself. What I would do is just make sure it's not bunched at the bottom, and then start trying to working it out from the bottom up if it wants to come out. Let's see. Now it's grabbing on all the teeth, so it's not super easy. Eventually you'll get it out. I would toss this. You don't really need to keep it. So there's the saw. Some of these are just one solid metal foil that goes all the way through the tang here. This one actually has reinforcement. It's actually a little bit better. Now, if you want to check this saw out, what you'll notice is that there's two different sizes of teeth and different tooth sets. Like these lean back a little bit more and the teeth are wider. These are narrower teeth and they're kind of more perpendicular, closer to 90 degrees this way. This is for finer cuts on this side, and this is for just rougher cuts. So this is a good saw to use, pretty fast, pretty efficient, and I will show you what this does. So once we get to the point where we're using saws and we are getting ready to cut wood, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get a pair of safety glasses and I'm going to put them on. And these are going to stay on the whole time we are doing our thing. The next thing I'm going to do is I am going to clamp the piece of wood that I'm going to cut. So I'm going to cut some scrap wood here, and I want to cut a piece off of it. So what I'll do is I'll clamp this to the bench top. So let's talk about some clamps here. You guys will get different clamps. This is called a spring clamp because it's operated by a big spring and it just opens and closes like that. Pretty straightforward. This is called a quick grip clamp, or quick grip style clamp if it's not actual Irwin quick grip, but it's the same deal. Now the way this works is normally it's locked and sort of inert. You can't really do anything with it. In order to open it, you press and hold here and you open this way. And you let that go and it will move up freely, but it will not move down. Then what will happen is you will get your piece of wood and you bring it more or less to where it needs to be, and then to completely tighten it, because right now it's still loose, you crank this handle and it will tighten further and that will stay put. Then to release it, press and hold there and it opens up. So that's your quick grip clamp. For cutting wood, I would recommend using the quick grip style clamp over the spring clamp. Spring clamps are good if you just need an extra pair of hands to just hold something together, especially if you're doing a glue up, let's say, which we will also talk about. But for cutting, I like the quick grip clamps better. They hold a lot better. Of course, if anybody has, a home shop situation and you have a bench vise, that's ideal. But we are not shipping you guys bench vices because they're like 150 pounds. So I'm going to take this piece of wood and I've decided I'm going to cut it this way. So I'm going to take my quick grip clamp, bring it over, lock it, and then for funsies, I'm going to get a second one. Same deal. You guys will get these in pairs. I recommend you use them both together because they'll offer extra stability. Because this is tight, but it's not, it's not glued in place. They're not welded in place here, so it can still move. So as we're getting ready to use the saw, let's go ahead and look at this piece of wood and talk about rip cutting and cross cutting. So there's two kind of major ways that you cut a piece of wood. There's a rip cut and there's a cross cut. A rip cut is when you make a cut with the grain of the wood. So cutting this way would be a rip cut. A cross cut is when you cut across the grain of the wood, which is going to be this way. So depending on what you're doing, it's going to be easier or harder. So if I had this piece of wood and I wanted to cut it, and I decided that I was going to rip it lengthwise this way, This would be probably the hardest way to do it. If you notice, the wood grain striations run longwise down the length of the wood. In most cases with ripping, with an actual piece of board, that's the way they're going to run. So with plywood, it's a little different story because plywood is made of alternating layers, thin layers of wood that have a grain pattern that alternates layer by layer. So it's a little bit different. But the other big issue is that when you're ripping a piece of wood lengthwise like this, you're also cutting into end grain, which is sort of the densest part of the wood and the most resistant, the hardest to cut. The grain is the most sort of disordered, and it's just not that easy to do. So if you take one of these longer boards and you decide you're going to rip down the length of it, you're going to have yourself a heck of a time. You can do it, but you're going to be there for a while. It's not super easy. That could be a demo in and of itself. We're going to skip it for now, just putting that out there. So cross-cutting is pretty straightforward. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to show you a cross-cut, and I will do a cut with each of the two blade surfaces so you can see them both. So we're going to start with the finer one. Now, the thing about a Japanese saw is that it cuts on the pull stroke. So the first thing I want to do is I want to just make a little notch. So I'm just going to go back and forth a few times until I have a notch, and it'll be a lot easier to cut them. So then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get comfortable. I'm going to use both hands, and I'm going to start cutting. And you're going to notice that I'm going to use the whole blade. Common beginner mistakes are the following. You have this entire blade, use the whole thing. If you just use a small amount, you're going to get fewer teeth per inch passing per cut, and you're just going to get a crappier cut. Okay, so there's a cut with the finer teeth. Pretty straightforward. And pretty straight cut. Now, we're going to go ahead and do another cut. I'm going to feed out a little more wood here. Just a little bit. And I'll show you the cut with the other saw surface. So the one I just used is the fine cut, which is for straighter, more exact cuts. This blade is for ripping, and it's coarser, but you'll see it's a little different. Okay, got a notch. Okay, so the rough cutting saw blade is going to cut much quicker, but it's going to leave a rougher surface. So that's your trade-off with the Japanese saw. You've got a fine cut surface that makes a smoother, more exact cut, takes longer, or you've got the ripping blade, which is basically just there to blast away wood and cut more quickly. Okay, so that's one thing. Now another way to cut is with this guy here. Now this is called the miter box. The miter box is kind of a low-tech way of using something akin to a power tool called a compound miter saw. And what this does is it has different notches in it that you can put the saw in. So there's a surface here, so you can do a 45-degree cut this way. And then there's one here to do a 90-degree cut this way. And then there's two of them this way for 45-degree diagonal cuts. Now, this is plastic. If you can cut a piece of wood with this saw, you can cut plastic with this saw. So, as a result of that, you want to be really careful when you're lining this up to do your cuts. Also, when you're getting through your cuts, you want to be careful to cut through your wood and then try to not continue cutting until you cut through the miter box itself. The more you cut into the plastic, the less accurate this thing will get and the less useful it'll be. So we're gonna go ahead and set this up, because obviously if I were trying to cut a piece of wood with this, I wouldn't just be able to hold it and cut. Now we're gonna cut this piece of wood here, and we're gonna just do a 45-degree cut through the middle of it. So what we're gonna need to do here is we're gonna need to clamp all of this down. So I'm gonna cut in this notch here so I can get away with putting a clamp over here because this is not in my way. And I do wanna be careful, by the way, if I wanna keep accurate. These channels are 45 and 90 degrees relative to this flat surface here. So if you're using the miter box and you have a piece of wood in the miter box, you want to be careful not to put it in like this, because if you need that to be 45 and the wood is not flat to one of the walls, you're not going to get 45. It's going to be off. So make sure that it's exactly where you want it to be before you set up to cut. Then you're going to take a clamp here, clamp both the box and the wood. And then we're gonna take a second clamp and we're gonna do the same thing from the other side. So now this all is held pretty tight. Okay, so now we're gonna go ahead and take our saw, make sure we've got enough room to cut, which we do, and we're gonna start cutting. So if you pull back too far, the saw will untrack itself like that. So your range of movement has to be a little bit more narrow than with the Japanese saw. The other thing you really have to be careful of is where your hands are, because if your hand turns up in the wrong spot, you can turn up cutting yourself. Now, another big difference between this saw, I would say the first big difference between this saw and the Japanese saw is that the Japanese saw is designed to cut on the pull stroke, and this saw, it's called the standard saw. A standard saw is designed to cut on the push stroke. So the way you use it is a little different, because you get to cut by pushing forward and away from yourself. The other thing you're going to notice is that this workbench, and this is, you know, a professional grade workbench, you're going to notice that the workbench is going to move. So if you're working at home and you're on a smaller table or something like that, you may have some trouble with a shaky surface. So something to keep in mind. And we're not quite through yet. Okay, and we are through. So there's your cut. Looks pretty good. And it cuts pretty smooth, pretty accurately. So there's your miter box. Okay, so we talked a little bit about how to take pieces of wood apart. The next thing we're gonna do is look at how to put some things back together. So you guys are gonna get a couple of different things. There's gonna be some hardware kits. There's gonna be some drilling tools and screwdrivers, and some people will get a drill. We'll talk about that a little bit later. The first thing we're gonna do is we're going to drive a nail. So these are nails. This is a pretty quick, easy, straightforward way to knock two pieces of wood together. And basically when you have this, you need a hammer. You will be getting a hammer. And let's say we wanted to attach these two pieces. So first thing you want to do whenever you're dealing with a fastener, a nail, or a screw is check to see how the length is relative to the thickness of your pieces. For a couple of reasons. Number one, you don't want it sticking out of the back of your work. Number two, you also have to worry about nailing or screwing your wood to whatever work surface you're working on, which may not be the greatest thing. So this nail's a little big for this. I'm gonna go ahead and use this other piece of scrap here. So I will nail these two things together. I'll use this side of the board. So if I were to just take the hammer and start whacking away at this thing right now, what's probably gonna happen is this all is gonna go flying. I would recommend holding things. The other thing I would recommend is if you want things to stay together permanently, you may want to use some glue. So we have this wood glue, and I will show you how to use it. So whenever you're going to put things together and you want them to stay together, I would recommend using some glue, whether you're using nails or screws. So in this case, I will take a little bit of wood glue. With wood glue, less is more. And I'm going to apply some. That is a ton already. Make sure that as you're working, you're closing your glue bottle, because wood glue likes to dry and gloop up on the top of the nozzle, and it tends to clog the bottle. And worse than just clogging across the top is that it's going to clog inside here. And a lot of people then end up unscrewing the entire cap and just pouring out the glue. You guys are going to get one bottle of glue. Make it last. And if you want to do that, just keep that clean and you will definitely not regret it. So take your glued piece, put it on the other piece, give them a little squish so that the glue will spread around between the two pieces. It'll create a little bit of suction. And you're also going to want to clamp if you can. Careful when you're clamping over glue because things want to slide around. So make sure that you're holding things where they need to be. And leave yourself room to work, because I need to drive a nail in that, so I got to leave myself a little room. So when you're going to do that, sorry, that's making me crazy. You're going to need your hammer and you need your nails. So the way this is going to work is you're going to put the nail in the wood. First, you're going to hold it. And you can just hold it by hand with your pinky and forefinger, or you can do it like this, whatever works for you. And my goal is first to just get this to stand up in the wood so I can get my hand the heck out of here. I don't want to hold the nail the entire time I'm hammering. Now, let's look at this hammer. What you're going to notice is that obviously it has a head. It's got a claw tooth if you need to pull a nail. And then at the bottom, there's the handle. There's a grip, and there's kind of a curved part at the bottom. You want to hold the hammer down here. You don't want to hold the hammer up here. I see people doing this a lot. You're not going to get any force with any hammer blow like that. You may have a little bit more fine control of it, but you're never going to actually successfully drive the nail if you hold the hammer this way. You want to hold the hammer back here. You have to trust your instinct to be able to aim it. You can do it. You may not think you can, but you can. So you're going to take your nail and you want it to stand up, hold it, and then strike with the hammer a few times. So now that's standing up on its own. I can get my hand out of the way. And now I'm going to let the hammer do the work. I'm not going to hold it up here. I'm not going to push the hammer down. I'm going to swing it from above and aim straight down and knock this nail in. And I'm going to just nail it until it's flat. You do not need to be shy about using a hammer. You will have to hit the nail pretty hard. That is okay. But also it's noisy and it shakes the table, so keep that in mind in your work area if there's other people around who may be inconvenienced by the presence of loud hammering. So that's a hammer. That's one way to drive a nail. The next thing we're going to talk about is going to be how to use screws. So over here we have a couple of different options. One thing we have is this small ratcheting, twisting driver. And what this will do is it rotates like this. Cool idea in principle. And it's really, really good if you are drilling some holes in a thinner material like a paper or cardstock or something, leather, something that isn't super thick. If I wanted to drill a hole in a big piece of wood though, this is not really your best option for a couple of reasons. Now I will demo this for you so you guys can see it do its thing. So this up here has a chuck. Hold this here so it doesn't rotate, loosen there, take the drill bit and put it in. Now, one thing I should explain is that when you first open the pack, you're gonna probably have to open this all the way and pull this out. Inside of the top of each of these drill thingos is a collet, and it comes with a second collet that comes in the bottom of the bag. So there's gonna be two of them. They're different sizes and they're two-ended. So you're gonna end up with a total of 4 different collets, and you're gonna need to use the appropriate collet based on the size of the drill bit. It comes with a set of drill bits, which is super handy and awesome. Now, obviously these are small drill bits. The purpose of these is primarily for things like drilling pilot holes, which we will get into shortly, and drilling holes in thinner and lighter material. So we're gonna make sure we have the appropriate collet. I took the biggest drill bit out of the set, so I need the biggest collet. And I'm going to place the collar over it and tighten a little bit, stick the drill bit in the collet as far as it will go, and then I'm going to tighten it hard. So these like to stick at the back, so you might need to twist a bit to coax it to kind of get started at first. And basically what it will do is you can take a piece of wood and you can start going like this. Now, if you're really super into this, you can sit here and drill holes in your wood all day this way, but you'll notice that the actual rotation of the drill bit is not super high, so it's gonna take a while to drill all the way through this. I'm not gonna actually have you guys watch me do it. Now, if this was a piece of paper, a piece of metal flashing, or a piece of cardboard or some other thing, I would have been through that already, a piece of leather, whatever. Would have been great for that. But for something like this, I'm probably not going to want to use this guy. What I would do is I would take this guy instead. Now this is called a hand drill, and the way this works is very similar to the way this works, except this one you push in and out, and this one has a crank that you rotate. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to put the drill bit there, but this time we're going to use a specific bit for a specific reason. So we're talking about pilot holes, and we're going to use screws. So let me show you some screws here. This is an assortment of screws you will get. There's a whole bunch of different sizes, and we're going to put a screw in the same piece of wood that we were using before. So I think that screw size is pretty good. Now when you do this, you are going to want to, if I just take this and try to drill it in here, what's going to happen is that it's going to be really hard to drill just straight against the flat piece of wood, and it's probably going to fall a lot. It's going to slip out of place, and I also run the risk of splitting the wood. So what I want to do is I want to have a drilled hole in this wood first, so that when I screw this into the wood, it has an easier job of getting into the wood and it's not as likely to split the wood. So to do that, I need to make that pilot hole, and in order to do a pilot hole, you've got to do it with the right size drill bit. Now, if I were to take this drill bit that I was just using to make this pilot hole would be a little bit too big. What you want to do is you want to find a drill bit that's roughly the size of the shaft of this screw, not including the spiral part. And that's the size you want it to be. So I want to step down maybe one size from this. The way this pack works is it slides open like this. So we're going to take a smaller bit. That's a little smaller, isn't it? Let's go down the size. Take a smaller bit, and we're going to go ahead and put that in the hand drill. So to use the hand drill, you have to put the drill bit in the chuck. This is called a chuck as opposed to a collet. It's got 3 little jaws in here. Now, if I just let this rotate freely, you'll notice that as I'm rotating it, the handle is spinning, which means that if I were to try to put this in here and tighten it up, it's not going to work because it's just going to do that, which is quite festive, but not really useful. So what we want to do instead is we want to hold this. So I'm holding this all with one hand. I'm putting the drill bit up here, and then with my other hand, I'm tightening. And I'm going to tighten it as tight as I can get it. And then I'm going to check to make sure that it is properly centered in the 3 jaws. Spin it around a little bit, make sure that it's rotating properly. And once I'm happy with that, I'm going to give it an extra little twist to make sure it's super tight. And then we're ready to make our pilot hole. So I'm going to go ahead and clamp this again, just so that I don't have to worry about anything going for a walk. Come back to my little corner here, clamp down. And then I'm going to pop this into the wood, and I'm going to start to rotate. Now this is still going to take a little while with a hand drill, but it's not too bad. The hand drill is actually really good if you're working with thinner, lighter woods like balsas or things like that. And once you go all the way to the bottom, you want to keep rotating it and pull it back out. Okay, so there is your pilot hole. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to drive the screw, which I left over here. So this is one of the screwdrivers that you guys will get. This is a ratcheting screwdriver. It's got 3 positions. In the middle is a neutral position. In the neutral position, it is an old-fashioned screwdriver. It just moves when you turn it around. Click that way, and now it's going to loosen. Counterclockwise is loosening. So when this is rotating counterclockwise this way, it's to pull out a screw. So if you set it to ratchet in that direction, it will just turn in that direction. The other position at the other end is going to tighten. So we want it to tighten because we're driving the screw in. So we're going to go ahead and put the screw into the pilot hole. We're going to align with it, and then we're going to start to twist. Now, even with the ratcheting screwdriver, at first you're going to need to fully rotate it a few times to get the screw started. But then after a while, you can just do that. Or you can use it like a traditional screwdriver and just turn it all the way. Now, when you're using a screwdriver to fasten a screw, you want to make sure that you're using a very heavy amount of downward pressure the entire time you're tightening the screw. If you don't press down tightly, the Phillips head bit is going to slip in the Phillips head slot that's in the top of the screw, and as it starts to slip, it's going to end up stripping out the screw and you won't be able to drive it. So you want to make sure that you're pressing firmly the whole time that you're driving the screw. And keep going until it is flat. Now, you'll notice that these screws are pan-headed, and so you've got to drive it nice and flat in order to get it to stay put and to make a nice even plane. So that's how you drive a screw with a screwdriver, ratcheting screwdriver. So those are the hand tools. One more little thing that I will mention about the ratcheting driver is that it does come with a small clamp, and you can see it is very small. Again, thinking about doing, using it for applications with, small work, you can put a piece of material in here, tighten this wing nut on the end, and it'll hold the piece for you. But this is still not really all that stable, so I would then recommend that if you're using this clamp, you take that clamp and you clamp it with one of these clamps to hold it in place. So that's just an extra little fun thing that you can do with that set. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the drill itself. So some of you are going to get this drill as part of your kit. What you're going to get is you're going to get the drill, you're going to get a battery, and you're going to get a charger. You're going to want to make sure that you have your charger plugged in, and whenever you're not using the drill, you're charging that battery. Leave it charging. Don't leave the battery in the drill, because the battery can actually drain on its own when the tool is not in use. And then when you come back to use it again later, you're going to be without battery and you're going to have to wait a while for it to charge. Average charge time on one of these batteries is probably about a half hour, 45 minutes. So you need to give it a little while. And it's a 20-volt battery, so it's got some heft, but if you're doing anything particularly heavy duty, it's not going to last that long. So let's take a look at some of the features of the drill. So that's the chuck. You can tighten this here. We'll talk a little bit more about it. We'll loosen it. And over here on the top, you've got some settings. So the first major setting is this 1, 2, 3 toggle. This is your overall torque. Your torque basically translates into more rotational force. The higher the number, the more rotational force overall. So most of the time, a 1 or a 2 is fine. For heavy duty applications, you're going to want to bump it up to the 3. Now, other things we have here are, this is an adjustment for tool function, and you're going to have numbers. This number corresponds to, there's a clutch in here, and this will be a point that will determine when the clutch will slip. And when the clutch slips, what will happen is that the tool will just click and not continue driving. Why would you want that? If you want to make sure that you don't over tighten a screw, you want to set this low. If you need more force, you want to set it high. And then there's this setting here, which has a symbol that looks like a drill bit on it. That is for when you're drilling holes. So we're going to go ahead and use this thing to both drill a hole and, we're going to do a pilot hole, we're going to do a through hole, and then we're going to drive a screw, and you can do all of that with the drill. So we have it set at a 1. We have it set on the driver setting. We're going to open the chuck. We're going to put a drill bit in here. We're going to tighten it. So first you put it in by hand, center it in the 3 little jaws, hand tighten it, and then twist all the way. You're going to hear it click a bunch of times. That's a good sound. That means it's nice and tight. The other setting that is on this drill is over here. You see a little arrow pointing forward. If you flip the drill to the other side, you're going to see a little arrow over here pointing backward. That is a toggle switch that has 3 positions. This position forward is what you need to drill a hole. The center position is a lock. This means that no matter how much I press the trigger, it's not going to spin. The third position, pushing it in that way, is going to be your reverse, which is to pull out a screw. So for what we want to do, we want to make sure we're in the first position with the arrow pointing forward, press it in, and now it's going to be rotating clockwise. Often we will get students who use the drill for the first time. They're trying to drill a hole and they're just getting a lot of smoke and not actually making a hole. And often they will think that the drill bits do not work, when in fact they are only using the drill in reverse. So let's come over here and make a hole in a piece of wood. So we'll take this same piece of scrap we've been using. We're going to clamp it this way. Now, a couple of major things about a drill. So obviously this is a big power tool. This is a bigger deal, heavy duty. It's a lot easier to hurt yourself with this tool. I am never going to use this tool like this and drill a hole while I'm holding these things. Most likely I'm going to break the drill bit at the very least. And if things go wrong, I can definitely drill things I don't want to drill. I'm never going to drill this way, pointing towards my face. I am not going to drill immediately above my head. I'm not going to drill holes in any walls or anything that I don't know what is behind the walls or the floor or anything like that. If you run into an electrical line, if you run into a gas line, things like that. So keep it on the wood. Make sure you know what you're drilling into. And we're going to go ahead and clamp. Always clamp. And there's really specific reason as to why you want to do this. When you're using this drill, you need both hands to use this drill. This is a lot of power. It's going to spin a lot. And doing it with one hand isn't particularly easy, nor can you get a particularly accurate drilled hole. So I'll make sure this is in forward, so it's going to be rotating clockwise. I'm going to press down with my right hand, or your dominant hand, and then I'm going to put my other hand over the back of the drill like this. And then I'm going to start the bit, go in and come out. Keep the drill spinning the whole time you're cutting and the whole time you're withdrawing the drill bit from the hole. And that's how you do a through hole. Very similar to the way you would do a pilot hole. So we're going to switch down to the drill bit that we were using in the hand drill, because that's what we used to do the pilot hole before. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and I'm going to click to the middle position. So that's to drive in, that's to drive out. In the center, it's neutral. I want to lock it before I change bits. Loosen by hand, pull out the drill bit. Come back to our hand drill, hold it, loosen the chuck, pull the pilot hole drill bit out, pop this in here, tighten it all the way, and then we can put it in forward. I'm going to come over here and drill another hole. Okay. Then we can use this to drive a screw in there. So instead of using this guy, we can use this. You're going to need a thing for that. The thing you're going to need is going to be this. This is called the driver bit. You will have one. And leave the drill in neutral when you're doing that. Open this up. This is going to be hexagonal and it's going to fit in the 3 jaws. Tighten all the way. Then we will take a screw, that size, and we will put the screw in the hole, hold it. Now, this is where things are going to get a little trickier. So the screw is in the pilot hole, the driver bit is in the slot in the back of the screw. I have the drill in my right hand, or my dominant hand if you're lefty, and then my left hand is going to be holding down on the drill. Remember before when I was working with the screwdriver, I said that downward pressure is very important, because if you do not use good downward pressure, the screwdriver is going to slip. With the drill, that is much bigger of a problem, and you're much more likely to strip out the screw if you do not press down hard enough. Common mistake when people are first using a drill is they think that the harder they press the trigger, the better they're going to drive the screw. That is absolutely false. The speed of rotation of the driver bit is not going to affect how well the screw drives. The pressure of the tool downward against the screw is what's going to make the difference, regardless of the speed. So I'm going to press this, I'm going to hold it, I'm going to lean with my whole body, and I'm going to hold it down. And I'm going to drive it flat like that. So the secret to that is pressure, 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 not speed. So that is how you do a pilot hole, through hole, and how to drive a screw with a drill. There's one more thing that I'm going to show you guys with the drill, which is a useful tool for making larger holes than you can with a drill. And that is going to be by using this thing here. Now this is a set we have. You guys, some of you will be getting this. These are called hole saws. This is a hole saw set. Now a hole saw is normally used by plumbers to make holes through walls for running pipe for plumbing. And this is definitely a rough cutting tool. I want you guys to be extremely careful with hole saws. Hole saws are not really designed to be used on a drill by hand. They're normally used on a tool called a drill press. You can use them in a drill, but you have to be extremely careful because they require a lot of torque in order to work properly, and it's very, very easy to get caught in the middle of drilling a hole and having the tool jam, or having the piece of wood you're cutting go flying or something like that. So you have to be extra, extra careful. So let's talk a little bit about the hole saw set here. So the smallest one is going to be about a 1/2 inch, and the biggest one is going to end up being, I think this is 2 inches. I don't know if they're labeled. High-speed steel by metal, 2.5 inches. So 2.5 inches is the biggest size. So you're going to notice a couple wacky things about these. When you look inside of them, there's holes in the back, and there's a big hole and then 4 little holes around it. That's all good because you can't just use this, because there's no way to get these things to work together like this. What you need is one of these guys. This is called an arbor. And this arbor in particular is the one that you want to use for some of these bigger ones. There's 2 arbors that come in this set. There's a big arbor for the larger hole saws, and then there's a smaller arbor for the smaller hole saws. How do you know which one to use? The bigger hole saws have the 5 holes in the back, and the ones with the 5 holes go with the bigger arbor. The smaller hole saws only have 1 hole in the back. That's going to be with the smaller arbor. So here's how this works. So for the smaller hole saws, you're going to notice something. There's 2 different sizes of hole on the bottom. And the reason that is because this arbor, the small arbor, can actually work in 2 different diameters. One diameter is the one that's here already. That one is going to work with the smaller hole size. And the way you do that is you just screw these 2 things together. Now, if you find that you try to attach this and it just goes through the hole, then you need the adapter. The adapter is this thing here. It's going to be sitting in the set right there. And you pop this in here, you tighten it by hand, and then you can take that hole saw and use the smaller arbor and just tighten it all the way. So there's that. For your larger sizes, you're going to take the big arbor, and you've got your 5 holes to align. So first you tighten it, and you go as far as you can go, but then you're going to have to back it up a little bit because you're going to have to get the pegs that are in the arbor to line up with these holes. So let me show you this outside of the arbor so you can see what I mean by that. So you can see that there's these 2 sort of columns on the sides. And what they are going to do is, as you tighten this, they're going to come out of the top. So we want to get those pegs to line up through those holes. So we're going to go ahead and tighten them together. Go all the way and then back it up a tiny bit to line up the holes. Hold the arbor with one hand so it doesn't spin, and then start tightening. And you're going to see that the pegs are going to go through 2 of the holes. And the other 2 holes are just there, chilling, doing their thing. So that's all set. And then you can take this and you can attach it to your drill. So you open the chuck all the way, put this in, and tighten it up. Now, for this, you're going to want to leave it on the drill setting, and you're going to want to blast this up to 3 because you're going to need more force. And then what we're going to do is we're going to make a hole in a piece of wood. So we're going to take this piece here, we're going to clamp it, get 2 clamps on it. Now, make sure too that whenever you're making through holes through things, whether it be with a regular drill bit or whether it be with a hole saw, make sure that you are working with the area you're going to drill in off the edge of your workbench so that you don't drill into your workbench. So you'll notice that this bit has a big drill bit that sticks out of the middle of it, this hole saw. This is here to center it while you're cutting. So this is going to go in first, then when it's nice and centered, then you keep bringing it down, and then these are going to bite in. And then you're going to cut a circle. So you press this in. Now with this thing, this guy is heavy. These tools are heavy, and they are going to kind of drive themselves. You actually kind of, instead of pressing really hard like you would when you're driving a screw, you basically just want to hold the tool, and instead of pressing down so much, just stabilize it. So one hand is operating the trigger. The other hand, instead of being back here pushing straight down, is going to be over here, just stabilizing it and keeping it cutting straight. Okay, so there's a hole saw cut. That's a big old hole. And that is how those work. Now, when you're done with it, a couple things you're going to notice. It's going to wear the paint on the hole saws. That's completely normal. You may have something happen where the plug that you just cut out of the piece of wood is going to stick here. It's going to be flat. It's going to get stuck inside the cup of the hole saw. If that happens, you're going to need to use another device of some kind, a tool, a drill bit, a screw, something, a screwdriver to pull that. You're going to have to get into all of these slots. The reason these slots are here is so that when that plug gets stuck, you can get something in here and leverage this out. So another thing that is in this set, pardon me, is there is an Allen wrench here. The reason this is here is if you get one of these really stuck in here and you cannot get it out, you're going to want to take this drill bit and loosen it because it'll make it easier to get out. So I would take it off the drill if you have to do that. Put the drill aside, it's less awkward. And you're going to notice that on the side there's a hole in there. There is a hex set screw. You take your wrench, you pop it in there, and you go counterclockwise. It might be a little stuck because it's fresh from the factory. There we go. More torque on the longer leg. Loosen it until this moves. And usually when you move that, you can pull this whole thing out. I'm making that look easy for sure. I just infomercialed that. So like if you kind of have to have more of a struggle with it, just get on the struggle bus because that's just how it's going to go. So the other reason you want to use this hex wrench is because the hole saws are roughly the same size, but not exactly. Some of the cups are deeper than others. And you're going to want to adjust the relative stick out of the centering bit. Now, for the really big ones, there is kind of a limit. You'll notice that there's a notch at the bottom of this bit. So there's a limit to how far in it's going to go. So you don't have to worry too much about that. But you can also set it at different heights so that it's sticking out more or less from the cup based on the size hole saw you're using. You want it to stick out about a 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch past the teeth of the hole saw if it's going to be set properly. And then once you're happy with it, tighten it up. And then don't lose that wrench. I mean, it's a common size, but don't lose it. Why lose it? Okay, so there's your hole saw. So there's one more tool we're going to talk about, and that is going to be, actually there's two more tools. We're going to talk about 2 ways of carving wood next. Okay, so now we're going to talk about some wood carving. So there's a couple of options. Some of you guys are going to get a wood carving set that is hand tools like this. This is also going to come in a box with a bunch of pieces of balsa wood, which is a really, really soft, easily carvable wood that you can get some pretty cool stuff out of. I'm going to demo these tools with just some cedar that I've already been using in the demo, which is definitely not as soft. So let's look at what comes in the pack here. So you're gonna have a bunch of different cutting tools with different types of blades. Some are gonna be like this that are gouges. And then some of them are going to be like this. They're just like flatter cutting pieces for more sort of targeted work. The other thing that's gonna come in here, you're gonna notice they're all covered because they're sharp. So you gotta be careful when you're handling them. Also, you wanna keep them sharp. So you got this little thing here. This is a whetstone. What I would recommend that you do is I would use this other little clamp that came with the other set of twist drill, and I would take the little twist drill clamp and I would use this as a clamp to hold your sharpening stone. Okay, so you hold that, tighten it in here, and if you can fit clamps on it, good. If not, you probably can get away with not, but I usually clamp it down just because I don't want it moving around while I'm working. Now you're gonna have to maintain these because they're gonna get dull, and they're gonna get dull pretty quick as you use them. You're gonna notice that one side of this has kind of a half pipe shape. That is going to be for sharpening your gouges. And the way that you're gonna wanna do this is, I would actually recommend taking this little stone and dropping it in a cup of water for about 5 minutes before you're ready to sharpen. They sharpen better when they're wet. You don't have to worry about the water rusting the tool. You just dry the tool off after you're done, you'll be fine. And the way you're gonna work is, you're gonna press this in here, and you're gonna press down here, and you're gonna go all the way down the length. So you're pushing from the back with one hand and pressing down with the other, and just keep them sharp. If you're noticing that you're trying to cut and the tool's going dull, sharpen it up. How do you know it's going dull? When you first get these, you'll be able to run your finger across it and you'll be able to feel the blade as it passes all of the ridges of your fingerprint. You're gonna be like, whoa, I didn't realize my fingerprints were this rough. That means the tool is nice and sharp. It might even grab a little bit, so be careful doing that. If you run your finger past this and it's smooth, then it's dull. Also, if you're trying to cut and you're getting a lot of tear out, which means little tiny splinters of wood on the edges of your cut, then that's also a sign that it's getting dull. If you find that it's getting increasingly difficult to push the carving tool through the wood, that's another sign that it is getting dull. So once it starts to do that, you want to make sure you're sharpening it. For the flat tools, flip it over. The back end of it is flat. And you'll do the same thing. You'll clamp it in here. You'll take your tool. You're going to notice that the flat ones all have a bevel across it diagonally. You need to press the bevel flat against the stone. So the easiest way to do that is to press. Obviously take the plastic off of it. I'm just leaving it on for the demo. And you're gonna need to press with one finger like this and then move up in a straight line all the way across. And you won't need to do it a ton. If you sharpen every day when you use the tools, right after you're done working, just sharpen. 10 passes maybe per tool, you know? So obviously not the ones you're not using. If you're only using one or two, just go across it 8 to 10 times, you know, and that'll keep them nice and sharp. And then you don't need to do it when they go dull. You just keep them sharp all the time. That's what I usually do. So to cut, wood grain is going to be an issue here again. And you're going to notice that when you're cutting with the grain of the wood, you're going to have a lot better time. So you basically are going to separate wood from its own grain and tear it out. And it just kind of comes right out. Boom. So the flat tools are very good for that. Now, you might need to have a little more control on that because let's say you don't want this to tear out through the entirety of the grain. So what you can do is you can take this tool and you can score at the back. And what that scoring is going to do is it's just going to create a break point so that as you're pulling wood out of the grain, it's just going to break off there. So you create a little shoulder. You may have to do it more than once as you get further into your cut. Now, watch where your hands are when you're doing this because it's really easy to cut and slip. And if my finger was right there from that slip, I could have just perforated my fingertip. So then you can just cut in, and a nice sharp set will make pretty short work of cedar. Certainly it will make short work of your balsa. And I'm also going to send some scrap of pine and a couple of other soft woods that you guys can mess around with. And, you know, you can go pretty crazy with this. You can, you know, make a sculpture of a squid or, you know, portrait of Fiorello LaGuardia, whatever strikes your fancy. Another thing you can use is a gouge like this. The gouge is less for working the corner and more for working in the middle. You can use it in a scooping kind of position or direction or action or whatever. And what you'll notice though is, notice when I'm going with the grain, I get a nice clean cut. Okay. Now, when I go cross grain, it doesn't even want to cut. So whenever you're carving with hand tools, your wood grain is going to dictate what you're going to be able to do. Another thing is that these are nice and rounded on the back. There's no reason you couldn't press the back of the tool into the middle of your hand like this, so you can have a little bit of extra agility and a little bit of extra oomph when you're cutting. So there is that. Next, we're going to talk about the Dremels. You can pause it. All right, so the last thing that we're going to talk about is going to be the Dremel set. This is another carving tool, except this one is powered by electricity. So your Dremel set, you're going to need a slightly different setup. As I was doing with the carving set, you'll notice I'm sitting down now. It's just more comfortable. But I also need a good power supply, so I just plugged in a power strip and I set it up over here. I'm not going to plug anything in until I'm ready to use it. Just good advice in general. So I'm going to open the kit. If you see the word Dremel facing up, then you have this laid on the table correctly. Don't open it upside down. Everything will fall out of the kit most likely, especially after you open everything. This one has not been opened yet, so this is also an unboxing video. So let's go ahead and open her up. So here we have some things. So I'm going to show you guys the basic Dremel and how to use it, and I'm going to let you guys kind of play around with some of the other features. There's a couple of extra collars and things like that that have specific applications to control angles and stuff. I can definitely provide you guys with more info on these, but generally speaking, they're just in the box. You don't really, most of the time if you're using a Dremel, it's rare that you're going to be using those things. You may fall in love with them. Definitely knock your socks off, enjoy the heck out of it. There's an instruction manual here. I will be your human instruction manual for the moment, but I will not take those out of those kits for you. So, and there's also a full-sized manual and some other crap in here. So I don't know. I don't really open these anymore, so I don't know whether there's anything any good in there. But I will pop it back in here for you. Okay. So what we have here is the Dremel tool itself. Plugs into the wall. The cable is got a little cable tie on it. I'm going to remove the cable tie. And the cable is not crazy long, so that's why I put my power strip on top of the bench. Work close to a plug so that you have plenty of agility. The other thing it has is it's got a little hook in it so that after you're done, when you wrap it up, it catches on the cord itself and it's easier to keep it all together. So the other thing you're going to get is you're going to get this little kit. I thought that was held down, but it's just kidding. This little kit is going to give you some basic Dremel bits and bobs and burrs and such that you can use. There's a little barcode on here. You got to move that off so you can open it. Be careful with this thing. These things like to go flying. And you're going to have a couple of different types of tools in here. This is the stuff that you're going to be probably using the most for wood. It's going to be these metal burrs. There's a few of them, not many. Now, what you'll notice right away is that they are small, and that is okay. These are for fine carving. So sometimes these are used supplementarily to a wood carving set, or sometimes you do everything with them. Other things that come in this kit, there's a little bit of jeweler's rouge. That is to make things shiny. It does not particularly do much to wood. It is meant to be used with these fuzzy little bonnet things that you can put on one of the particular types of collets that are here. I'm going to skip them for what you guys are doing because we're primarily focusing on the wood stuff. And then there's also all of these little drum sandy things over here, and some of these stone drums as well. I will caution against using these with wood because they will tend to clog. The little drums, maybe not quite as much, but in general, what's going to happen is that you're going to have high-speed rotating abrasive drums, and they're going to be moving at speed, cutting through the wood. The wood has sap, and the wood basically becomes sawdust while you're cutting or while you're sanding. So what's going to happen is that you're going to get a layer of wood sap and sawdust that is going to just clog this up, and it's going to make it completely smooth. It's going to probably smell good, but it's going to be a good smelling, useless drum sander. So I would not recommend using any of that stuff with wood. If you are dying to do so just to see what happens, use the coarser drums. So there's some of these that are little sleeves, right? And the little sleeves, you can change them on this particular collet. These you might be able to do a little bit with wood because the grit on it is enough that you might need to have like a toothbrush that you are not using for your teeth to be able to kind of clean this out while you're using it. But the really fine ones and the stone bits that, have the stone attached to the they come like this, that, they're built in one piece like this. Don't use these on wood. They're going to clog like hell. The other thing that's in here are cutoff wheels. I will demo a cutoff wheel, but I will caution you about using these cutoff wheels for several reasons. The most salient of which is that the cutoff wheel tends to shatter while in use, and the other, obviously that's, a dangerous thing. And the other reason is because you're already going to have a Japanese saw or a standard saw. So you already have a really, really good way of cutting stuff off. And using the riskier option to cut things off when you just need to do a regular cut and you have another option, I would definitely choose the other option first. Okay, so I'm gonna demo some carving first with this bit here, this burr actually. So now I'm going to show you how to attach a burr to the Dremel. So let's look at the Dremel. We've got a couple things here. It's got a little hinged hook here. You can hang it on something. Woohoo. Then there is a speed setting here. So when you turn this thing on, you're going to turn it on and it's going to pick a speed and it's going to stay at that speed. There's no variable speed on this model. So for wood, you probably want to be, around a 4 or a 6. So we can just go ahead and set that. Now up here, there is this whole chuck mechanism happening. There's a lock here. Right now, if I just rotate this, this will rotate here. For wood, you can pretty much ignore this. And this will rotate freely. So I can't loosen this. This has got a little chuck and collet set up the way that some of the other tools do. So I'm going to press and hold this lock button and I'm going to turn this, and at some point it's going to click. So I'll do it again so you can hear it. Oh. And then I'm going to rotate that and it will open. Then I'm going to take this burr, I'm going to stick it in here, and I'm going to hand tighten. Now, you can play with how far in or out this is. Further out, you have a little more agility. So you can hand tighten it, and if you want a little extra oomph, some of these come with a little wrench. Yeah, it's on the bottom here. If you want a little extra oomph, take this. Is the paltriest wrench I've ever seen, and then tighten it further. Okay, so there's that. So now that it's set up, I'm going to get ready to do some cutting with it. So I'm going to put on my face shield. You will notice that I'm also going to leave on my safety glasses. You want to wear both, safety glasses and a face shield. Just put this over your head. And on the back, there's a knob. So tighten it. Don't over tighten it. You'll get a ripping headache after a little while, and you might feel like you're having a religious experience, which is not really useful while you're trying to make sculpture. Then I'm going to go ahead and plug it in. I want to make sure that it is not on when I do that. So I'm going to click it actually to off, because the on-off switch on this model is built into the speed setting. So leave it on off before you plug it in. Then plug it in, then pick your speed. So I'm going to keep it at about a 6. Now, I usually use both hands on this. This whole front end is rubberized, so it's easier to hold. And you'll actually see that it seems like a small burr, but it's actually pretty aggressive. So you can actually do quite a bit with it. So that's basically what it does. And you can then go back and sand through this either with sandpaper by hand, or you can switch to a different burr. So I'm going to unplug it because I'm going to switch. So I'm going to press and hold the lock. I'm going to get the little wrench thing. We'll loosen, and then we'll go ahead and we'll get one of these little sanding discs so you can see what this does. So the main things to worry about are just things going flying and accidentally making contact with the bit or the burr while you're using it. So you're using both hands. Your hands are pretty close to this. This whole thing is rotating, so you just have to keep your fingers out of the way. So I'm just lightly taking passes. I'm not really pressing super hard. And as you can see, it got rid of all of that burr from when I cut before, but also it brought out the wood grain a lot more, so you can actually see the striations in the wood. So it has a nice look to it. So, and it held up. So the drums for wood, you're good to go. The ones that are solid, that are attached to their little arbors, these guys do not. And then the other buffing ones I would skip as well. Cut off wheels, skip.